Hey everybody, it's Party Elite, and today I'm happy to say I'm Jezzailing all over the place, and I hope you'll join me as we spray the musk of excitement across the world. Gross references aside, the new Total War DLC has been revealed and it's looking absolutely amazing. Let's give the trailer a watch first, and then we'll go over all the little details that CA revealed today. Man, that trailer is so amazing. I really like the music as well. They've been hitting the nail on the head with these trailers more and more as time goes on. But after a very long wait, Creative Assembly has finally graced us with a glimpse of what we knew was coming all along. The next Lord Pack DLC, The Prophet and the Warlock. On April 17th, alongside another free Lord we don't yet know about, an overhaul to Bretonnia, the Skaven in general, and the Lizardmen in general, Ikit Claw is being added to the Skaven under his Clan Scryer banner, while Tehenhauin or Tehenhauin is going to lead his Cult of Sotek for the Lizardmen. These are both very interesting characters, and they will make fine additions to our collection of lords and factions in Lustria, where I assume they both will have their start positions as they fight for control of the Vortex in the Eye of the Vortex campaign and in the Mortal Empires campaign. Ikit Claw is a madman, or a mad rat I suppose, and something of a tinkerer, something we're going to see reflected in his Clan Scryer Forbidden Workshop mechanic, where food and the new warp fuel resource will be turned into upgrades for various units, while also unlocking ancillaries and at least one new regiment of renown. Oh, and it can build and stockpile Warp Storm Doom Rockets, which is an off-map army ability that can be launched just once per battle to cause massive damage. We actually see it in this trailer right at this moment, and it looks goddamn glorious. Now, Ikit Claw is actually seen in the trailer using his halberd, Storm Demon. He's also got his iron frame armor on that comes with a warp fire thrower, and imagine one, if not both of these, will be retrieved from a quest battle or two. Typically, it's been one quest battle for each of these legendary lords, if memory serves, so I feel like it'll just be the one item, and it'll likely be his halberd, I think. I also think we can assume that Ikit Claw will at least be armor-piercing and anti-large, and he should also have physical and magical resistance, or perhaps a ward save, when he has that iron frame armor on. Now, Storm Demon should also allow him to use Warp Lightning Bolts as magic missiles. I feel like all of that's going to be there. I'm very curious actually what's going to be locked behind a quest item, or if he's actually going to end up with multiple quest items, and if that's something we're going to see for his counterpart as well. Now, Clan Scryer will also have the opportunity to build Ikit Claw's infamous Doom Spheres below enemy settlements to completely wipe them out and turn them into ruins, but we'll touch more on that later because it's part of a much bigger conversation. Tehenhauin, or 10-in-1, whose name will likely be butchered for years to come by me. No idea how to say it, so feel free to let me know in the comments. He stars opposite our rat hero, a Red Crested Skink who is particularly swole. Tehenhauin rose to power when his temple city of Shaka was devastated by Clan Pestilence, and he shows up in this trailer riding a massive stegodon, holding the blade of the Serpent's Tongue and the plaque of Sotek. Again, we might see one, if not both of these, turned into quest items, and I imagine the blade would grant a particularly potent poison damage effect, while the plaque would likely buff the ward save on our little Red Crested Skink friend. As somebody who has, in the lore, worked alongside the physical manifestation of Sotek in snake form to fend wraths off of Lustria in the past, you can bet that there are some Sotek-themed notes to Tehenhauin in the game. With his belief that sufficient sacrifice might bring Sotek back once more, Tehenhauin actually follows unique missions that unlock various forms of sacrifices that grant unique banners, followers, buffs, and regiments of renown. Now, these sacrifices are actually performed using offerings that are collected through a post-battle option. The larger the offerings, the bigger the potential rewards, one can assume. Now, at the highest level of sacrifice, the Invocation of Sotek, we'll see Sotek himself come to the field represented as his snake avatar helping the lizardmen in battle. That sounds absolutely amazing. I cannot wait to see it in action. Now, lords aside, we're getting a great deal of new units and regiments of renown as well. We'll start, of course, with the Skaven. The Warlock Master is a new lord type that uses the lore of Ruin and sounds like a support type character, buffing Doom Flayers, Doom Wheels, and weapons teams. I assume that means Ratling Guns and maybe Warp Fire Throwers as well. Now, as mounts, they can get Doom Flayers and Doom Wheels for themselves, presumably giving them anti-infantry and armor-piercing damage. We see Ratling Gun weapons teams right off the bat in the trailer, anti-infantry and beautiful to behold, all while suppressing the enemy, applying a speed debuff to them, and I guess allowing the rats to get a little bit more skirmishing in, or maybe pulling away into safety more often if necessary. Now, the Warplock Jezzails show up a touch later, and they'll be boasting great range with their armor-piercing, shield-breaking shots. They also have high-quality shields, and I'm not sure if that means they're coming in with silver shields, or maybe they're coming in with gold shields that you only see when your block chance is at 100% or higher. That would be really cool if they can completely block any incoming bullets and bolts shot in the front arc. And then finally, the Doom Flayers kind of roll by like nobody's business with armor-piercing damage output and hopefully a trail of blood behind them. The regiments of renown are separated into two categories for the Skaven. The first consists of 8 that are unlocked through the traditional leveling up methods, and they will be available for multiplayer and skirmish battles and online battles as well. And the latter consists of 5 that are unlocked in the workshop, and those 5 will not be available for multiplayer use, they're just for the campaign. Let's start with the first 8. Ikit's Zap Zap is a Warp Lightning cannon that increases target ability cooldown times. That's a very interesting and specific effect. I guess you're going to use this to snipe enemy lords. It might be very helpful in preventing certain, magic reuses or against the dwarfs and stuff like that. A very, very specific effect, actually. The clan Vulcan Tail Slashers are clan rats with shields, and they deal flaming attack damage while being immune to fire damage themselves, so that will be nice and helpful against, for example, treekin and things like that, so it's nice to see that for the Skaven. And then Blightscab's Plague Pack are Plague Monk Sensor Bearers that have a special ability that grants immunity to psychology to nearby units, and I think that's a bit of a game changer, using these guys to sort of support a bunch of Skaven units in the area that would otherwise flee under the effects of fear and terror and things like that. Then the Teethbreakers are a Ratling Gun weapons team that carry concealment bombs to get the stalk and unspottable trait, and this will allow them to get really close to the enemy, or maybe come in from a flank or from a different angle, or it'll also allow them, of course, to easily run away from potential, ranged shots, to run away from potential cavalry threats and things like that. Now, the Council Guard Storm Vermin with halberds are unbreakable, and they have the Guardian trait to assist nearby lords and heroes in sort of keeping them alive, while Natty Bubbo's sharpshooters are warp-locked Jezzails that have the stalk and snipe abilities, so that should be really nice to see when used effectively on the field, applying a lot more sneaky play and sneaky approaches to the Skaven when they're using all of their concealment bombs, using all of their stalking units. I think there'll be some fun to be had there. We get the Dwarf Thing Menace as well. These are Doom Flayers with the Sunder Armor ability, which reduces the effectiveness of enemy armor temporarily, and they're also able to cause fear. And then we have the Wheels of Doom, and they are the last of these 8 units. They're coming in with extra powerful missile shots that actually apply the Discourage leadership debuff to enemies. So that's nice and helpful if you come in with these Wheels of Doom. You know, they're gonna cause fear, they're going to get the Discourage debuff as well. Of course, they're going to cause a lot of damage, they can come in from the flank, so you can probably do a fair bit of morale damage with the Wheels of Doom coming in from like the side or from the rear into an enemy front line. Should be really nice to see. Now from the workshop, and so again, only available in the campaign, we have the Warpfire's Wheel Doom Wheel, which has better melee stats and regeneration, which should mean it's also susceptible to fire damage. The Black Hole Flayers are Doom Flayers with better melee and fear-causing abilities. The Doombringer's Warpfire Thrower weapons team with better melee stats and the Unbreakable attribute. And then we finish off with the Death Dealer's Ratling Gun weapons team that have much higher range, damage, and fire rate. So they should be pretty intense, and if they're also able to slow the enemy down, they might be pretty good at controlling enemy cavalry as it comes bounding towards your rats. Meanwhile, on the other side of the field, the Lizardmen get a Red Crested Skink Chief as a unique lord, one that is melee focused and able to ride Horned Ones, Ripperdactyls, and even Ancient Stegodons eventually. They also get 6 new battlefield units of their own. The Red Crested Skinks are armed with great weapons, making them armor piercing. They're also extremely fast, making them ideal for flanking. So it'll be really interesting to see these Red Crested Skinks in action, bringing in that armor piercing damage. I imagine they'll be relatively on the cheaper side of things. Should be quite helpful for the Lizardmen. The Salamander Hunting Pack is a fast, fireball-hurling, fear-inducing monster unit that can also cause fire damage in melee. So again, we're seeing some assistance over here in terms of causing fire damage, which should help against certain factions in certain situations. The Ancient Salamander is a bigger salamander. It induces terror, causes fire damage in melee, and it also makes the enemy more susceptible to fire damage with its bigger, more damaging fireballs. So there's going to be some interesting synergies there as well, I think, to make an enemy target more susceptible to this fire damage and then go in with the Salamander Hunting Pack perhaps. It'll be nice to see, you know, all of these units synergize alongside the older units that the Lizardmen already have, bringing in things like fire damage. So I'm very curious to see what kind of plays develop out of that. The Ripperdactyl Riders are airborne anti-infantry units, and they're going to have armor-piercing damage. And then there's the Ancient Stegodon with the Engine of the Gods, which is able to protect nearby friendly units with the Portent of Warding, which presumably gives ward saves, and it's also able to use the Burning Alignment Beam Attack, which I think is what we're seeing here. It looks like an absolutely insane wind spell, or maybe it's a vortex spell. Not sure. It looks more like a wind spell, but either way, it looks like it causes a vast amount of devastation in a concentrated area, and it looks like an orbital bombardment. I love it. And then finally, we actually see the Bastiladon with the Ark of Sotek. Now, this is a unit that I actually confirmed the eventual arrival of way back before the game even launched. In my first interview with the developers, we had a conversation, and they mentioned that they were struggling with some mechanic to do with the Ark of Sotek at the time, but here we are seeing it finally in the game, and it's able to summon a vortex of poison damage dealing serpents around itself using the Ark of Sotek. And I imagine that'll sort of be I think maybe visually similar to like the hounds that we've seen, you know, like Hounds of Orion and stuff like that, except it'll be snakes. It sounds though that it'll be just around itself rather than casting within a large radius. It might be just a radius closer to the unit itself. So very curious to actually see it in action, you know, when I get my hands on the DLC. Now, we also see 8 Regiments of Renown, no extras over here for the campaign, just these 8 that you can also use in multiplayer. The Thunderous One is an Ancient Stegodon that can bring bolts of lightning down to strike the enemies that it's fighting in melee. That sounds like it's very localized. It's not something you can use to hit elsewhere. It's just when you're engaged in melee. It also sounds like it's an ability that maybe only replenishes when in melee. We'll see. Now, the Star Chamber Guardians are Temple Guards with expert charge defense, magical damage output, and the Guardian trait. So again, they'll help keep your lords and characters alive. The Colossadon Hunters are Ripperdactyl riders that get a bonus versus large. It sounds like they hunt Colossadon, and if Colossadon means anything, it means big. So the bonus versus large makes sense, and hopefully it's a nice big chunky bonus versus large. And then we've got the Pop Hopak Cohort Cold One Spear Riders with Vanguard deployment, immunity to psychology, and the lack of primal instinct that would otherwise make them rampage. So that's really cool to see. It kind of completely changes one of the big pitfalls of these units. So I'd like to see these guys get a lot of use and provide some cavalry options as well for the Lizardmen. The Legion of Shaka are Saurus Spears that can use the Shield of Shaka ability to give nearby allies a bonus to missile resistance, so very specific use case scenarios there, but when used, if that missile resistance buff is big enough, it can make a huge difference on the approach to the enemy. Now, the cohort of Sotek are Red Crested Skinks, and they're unbreakable, and they have what I believe is a new ability called Refuse to Die. It's something that stops hit point loss just temporarily mid-battle. I assume it's one of the types that triggers when, health is down to 10%. It triggers, and it's temporary, it lasts for like 30 seconds, and then your unit can finally die. Pretty cool to see that on a unit, not a lord or a character of any type. So it's nice to see. I'm pretty sure that's a new one. I don't recognize Refuse to Die as a name here. And then finally, the Pahawks Sentinels are Pterodon riders with 20% physical resistance and armor sundering Rocks of Sundering that they can drop on a target to reduce their armor temporarily. And that's a pretty interesting ability, pretty helpful in, I think, breaking through specifically, particularly rather stubborn units at times. And with that 20% physical resistance, that means they'll have a bit more survivability as well. They'll be able to fly closer to the enemy and get shot at for a little bit longer, maybe also engage in melee for a little bit longer without having to worry too much about shattering instantaneously. So it's already looking like a pretty comprehensive update for the game. The DLC is feeling pretty thorough and pretty big. But that's not all we're getting, as I'm sure many of you already know. There's quite a big update coming for everybody who owns the game, whether they get the DLC or not. It's called the Doomsayers update, which is an excellent name, and there's another free legendary lord coming with it. My personal bet is on Gorok, though I'd like to see Thanquol. I hope we see him eventually, but I think this time around it's probably going to be Gorok, and I'm curious what you guys think it might be, what options there are between these two factions. And again, remember, everybody needs to end up at least 4 lords, but the Skaven are definitely getting special treatment like the Vampire Counts did for the first game. We're also seeing a quest for Lord Croak. That's right, all Lizardmen legendary lords can unlock a quest chain that will have them searching Lord Croak. And once you find Lord Croak, he's going to join the faction as an immortal hero, bringing his own skill tree, his own campaign map abilities, and of course, able to join you on the battlefield and fight and bring his superior strength. Again, he's one of the oldest big bad slans, and I think it'll be really cool to see him in action. I'm sure Creative Assembly has done a good job of representing his power and his prowess on the battlefield. And what I'm most excited for is something similar to the Vampire Coast Pirate Cove mechanic. The Skaven Under Empire is being brought to the game, finally. Now, we don't know too much about it yet, but apparently the Skaven can establish undercity operations beneath settlements through conquest and agent action, so much like Pirate Coves, and then they can use those undercities to bring wealth, accumulate resources, or drive corruption in the area. Now, undercities can also help with recruitment, it sounds like, which would be pretty neat, because if you can actually have a forward operating base right below the enemy's nose, that can really change things as far as, a battle of attrition is concerned, the length of an offensive is concerned. So it could be really cool if that's what they're implying with their statements about the undercities, raising up units and things like that. Also, sort of like the cherry on top of this beautiful little icing on top of this amazing little cake, as Clan Scryer, you can actually detonate a Doom Sphere device to blow the settlement up. and you just turn it into ruins. I mentioned this before, so it sounds like there's a bit of stealth required though. Like the more you advance your Undercity, the more likely it is to get spotted, and if it gets spotted, it can get destroyed. But you have to develop it to get access to more interesting things. At least that's what this mechanic sounds like. And I imagine the Doom Sphere is pretty hard to get, and it's pretty hard to activate, but once you do, it just completely wipes out the entire city, turns it to ruins, and then you can just stroll in with any small army and pick it up for yourself. That sounds super cool. Now, Bretonnia is also getting a rework. The Vow system will be available to all Bretonian legendary lords, the regular lords, their prophetesses, and their paladins. So it involves pledging characters to certain vows, and then fulfilling certain tasks to express the devotion to that vow. Now, when the pledge is taken, the characters receive a trait that is linked to the task that they are given, and when the task is completed, the vow will be granted, and that'll give the character certain buffs. It varies from reduced upkeep costs for specific units to better armor, or perhaps even immortality, which sounds like a pretty good gift. So after all that's done, the character can go chasing after a new vow. I imagine there will be a cap, a limit to how many vows any given character can chase, but I think that's a really nice implementation of this whole chivalry ideal of Bretonnia. Make them fulfill tasks, make them, make vows, and then gift them for fulfilling those vows and tasks. I think that's a nice way of translating the idea behind Bretonnia into gameplay mechanics. We're also going to be seeing new technology, and perhaps most importantly, Alberic is going to finally have a trident. We're also seeing a little dilemma related to Confederation, maybe uniting all the Bretonnian sub-factions in some way, and all of the Bretonnian lords are actually going to start mounted right at the beginning of the campaign, which makes sense. Peasant mob upkeep will also be 0 as long as you're below the peasant economy cap, and we're also seeing better Bretonnian garrisons, longer visits from the Green Knight, and if you're at Chivalry level 5, you will have unlimited uses of the Green Knight. So these are all really big changes and updates coming with or without the DLC. It's feeling like CA has delivered on the long wait, and I was originally pretty dead set on going in as Ikit Claw for a new Let's Play. Seeing the glorious experiments from his workshop and the beautiful destruction from his Doom Spheres is certainly a driving force behind that decision, but I'm really curious what you guys think about the DLC and the free update. You already have your next playthrough in mind? Are you worried anything is missing? I'm curious as always to hear your opinion. Now, we are missing the Troglodyte and the Razordon, which is honestly confusing to see excluded here considering how well-rounded the rosters are otherwise, and maybe they'll be added later, like the Bone Giant was for the Tomb Kings. That's always a possibility. The same goes for the Vermin Lord that's missing here, and I feel like there are a couple of other scattered units that are slipping my mind right now, but it is really strange to see these exclusions because of how thorough the DLC has been so far in filling out all the gaps in the rosters. So I do feel like, much like the Bone Giant for the Tomb Kings, we are going to get a delayed release. Just to inject a little bit of extra hype into the game when things are slowing down a bit, we might get another little unit pack for free. For now, I cannot wait to get a hold of the new content. What we are getting is looking great and pretty close to complete as far as I'm concerned, so I'm super pumped. Now, as always, I hope this video proved informative and you enjoyed the watch. If you did, don't hesitate to let me know you want more like it with a like and a comment down below. A massive thanks, as always, goes out to all of my channel members and patrons for supporting the channel on a monthly basis, and a massive thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.